service.
Hey everyone, welcome to Chef Sense. I'm your host, Chef Massey. All right, so today on the podcast, we have Chef Adam Lamb. Thank you for being on, Chef.
My pleasure, sir. My pleasure.
You have your podcast, Chef Life Radio,
Yeah,
and also Chef Life Coaching. Did I get that?
that's correct. Yeah.
So, it was your share on Chow. Thank you for that on the industry and the many things that, everyone goes through. I just wanted to share that real quick to appreciate you. And
Thanks. And it, proves the point that, talking about this stuff is really important. And the fact that you gravitated towards that message, I'm very grateful for sure.
Would you mind going into, like Chef Life Radio and then going into the Chef
Sure.
Life Coaching? Because it's amazing.
So I started in 2014. I was actually in Canada dating a Canadian woman. I didn't have a work permit. So I thought, what am I going to do with my time? Oh, I know. I'll start a podcast, as if I even knew what that meant in 2014. And back in the days that meant, learning WordPress and building a website and kind of cobbling together and bootstrapping all these different technologies. Now, thankfully, it's a much easier process to start a podcast and stay consistent with it. But it started out as a kind of a drunken love letter back to the crew that I missed. I'd worked at the Omni Homestead in Virginia for a year and a half. And, at peak, it's a staff of 165. Over 7 kitchens and 15 restaurants. So I really missed that crew. So I thought, what a great way to stay connected to them. And very quickly, I came up with the thought that maybe this is a great outlet for talking about something more poignant or more impactful for the industry. So I started off with a question: two chefs given equal skill sets, why would some cooks follow one and not the other? And they kept saying, well, it's leadership. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a red herring. It doesn't really tell me anything. Like, what are the attributes or what are the ways of being that this chef is engaged in that would have you follow them? So that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole. And I've been a student of, high performing leadership ever since then. And so Chef Life Radio has given me a platform to talk about specifically about the fact that, leadership is not anything that's taught in culinary school. Very rarely is there anybody who hasn't gone to culinary school, maybe someone like me who's basically, again, kind of bootstrapped our way through the industry. There's never an opportunity where someone says, hey, let me give you a class in leadership. Because ultimately it comes down to, you being able to move a group of people towards a certain outcome. And very often that group could have, 6 or 7 different ethnicities, 3 different languages, certainly different levels of schooling and understanding. So it's the biggest challenge that we face as industry experts. And so I thought that I would, again, kind of be a student of that and kind of come back to the podcast and kind of let everybody know what I've been finding. So that's how it started. And then COVID hit and, the industry lost 6 million jobs. And I thought to myself, well, gosh, if there's ever a time to bring back the podcast, this would be it. Because maybe people like me, who, fell into a particular job, did very well at it and just kind of follow that fluid path. And now there's another job and there's another job and now there's another job. There's a mortgage, there's a car payment, your family starts filling out again. But at what point did we ever just sit down and say, yes, this is what I want to do? And so I thought if folks were going to take this time out now, maybe see what it's like to be home. And if they want to come back to the industry, this is a great opportunity for them to really give some thought as to what their core values are. And align themselves with an employer that reflects those core values. Because very often I talk to a lot of chefs and one of the first things they say is they don't feel appreciated. And typically that comes about because you're misaligned with your employer's core values. It's about as simple as that. Maybe you want to be home by 7 o'clock to be with your family because your kids are small. And right now that's what's most important to you. But your employer actually expects you to do other things like being there all the time. So very often, I found that the frustration, it comes back down to a misalignment. So again, kind of using the podcast as a jumping off point to have these conversations and then to support the chefs in the industry by offering coaching from Chef Life Coaching as kind of a way to kind of bring them back and reignite the fire that got them here in the first place.
Wow. I think going over your duration of time, what were the points? I mean, what were the challenges in your life that made you make this shift for yourself?
Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 really clear examples of my humiliation, to put it bluntly. And I'm not talking about being humiliated from the outside. I'll give a great example. There was a dishwasher that I was working with, and I'm a product of the 80s and 90s and aughts, where to be a passionate chef was basically code switch for I can be an asshole and get away with it, right?
Yes.
And a lot of that behavior was enabled, right? So
Right.
if employers saw somebody who was like really talented, a lot of times, they weren't going to call them out for, drinking on the line or talking shit to
Right.
people or, doing lines in the bathroom or whatever that conversation was. But there was a dishwasher who I worked with, and happy-go-lucky guy, and was always kind of upbeat. But every time I turned my head, he was like doing something wrong. And one night, I took him into the office and gave him a good dressing down, and this man fell to his knees, screaming like a wounded animal. He was an immigrant, where that
Mm.
type of behavior is commonplace. But for me, it completely shocked me out of my
Wow.
my chef mode, and then rocked me back to like, holy shit, I'm a human being mode. And here I took away this man's dignity.
Right.
And what I've always known is that, a man with no dignity is capable of almost anything. So I was
Yeah.
really, really shocked at the way that it was taken. And I, got down on my knees and helped him back up to his feet and said, okay, bro, I'll figure out another way. Like, there's got to be another way to
Yeah.
do this. So there have been a couple times when I failed completely miserably, and where I had to look at my ways of being and say, yeah, there's got to be another way, man. Because I think ultimately, everybody made a big deal about when the millennials were coming into the industry. Like, they're
Mhm.
talking about they want this and they want that. God damn it, I didn't want this. And, a lot of the
Yeah.
older chefs were really pissed off because they never got that stuff.
No.
Right. But I don't think that, but I think that all of us wanted the same thing. We just came in the
Yeah.
industry and looked around and said, well, fuck, I'm not going to get that. Holy shit. I'll just keep my
Yeah.
mouth shut. Right. Like, don't be a whiny little bitch, that kind of.
Right.
And yet, they weren't asking for anything more than what we wanted, basic human dignity, making sure that, we had a clear career path or career trajectory, making sure that, we were valued as a whole human being and not just a name on a schedule or a position, given an opportunity to learn more so that we can become more. We all wanted these things. And sometimes, back in the old days, you had to kind of bootstrap that stuff around. I mean, the old adage of the chef with his shoulder up, you're trying to look around his shoulder to see what he's doing, because he's got this big secret that he's trying to hide,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah, and all these tricks
Yeah.
of trade that we grew up with. And yet when it comes down to, when we're creating an environment where everybody feels supported, there's a certain structure and willingness on the part of management and leadership to actually create an environment where people have an opportunity to learn to do better. Like, listen, man, you've got the skills for this particular job. I want to know what the job that you want after this. Like, what kind
Yeah.
of skill set is necessary for there, and let's start working on that stuff here. Because ultimately, building those skill sets only supports your organization and your operation more. And I don't know about you, man, but I don't want to be the last one on the line.
No, no, no. Right.
So unless we're willing to share those gifts and do it in a
Yeah.
in a structured, supportive way, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. I mean, it's nice to be
Absolutely.
wanted, right? It's nice to be the one. I used to call it like being the apex predator. Be the shark in the punch bowl. It's
Right.
nice to be the chef, and yet the clear realization is that my biggest takeaway is that a great metric for a chef is how many chefs came out of that kitchen.
Right.
Yeah, not in spite of, but because of. Right.
Right.
To
Wow.
me, that
Yeah.
says something about the chef that's actually running that operation.
Right.
Instead of like holding everybody down and you're going to fit this position. And that's
Suppressing.
all you're right. Exactly. Right.
Wow. Well, and that's where I think, and I came up, I mean, you would have been obviously my senior in the kitchen, but I mean, all respect, all respect
Sure.
for that, right? I mean, I was 91, 92 coming
Mhm.
into the industry. And for me, I looked at the industry and I'm like, this is more normal than my home life.
Right.
Like, what are you crying about? Like, I was hungry to actually show the chef, like, that I was worth something.
Right.
And in the kitchen environment, you became that sponge.
Right.
If you showed a sign of weakness, or a sign of that you needed something, it was a sign of weakness. It's
Sure.
kind of like a wolf pack,
Yep. Yep.
everybody's volleying for the next up. I mean, and you do get a dysfunctional family too, because you do get the clicks or you take care of each other,
Right.
but the weakness doesn't survive,
Right. Right.
and you're right, the apex situation,
The thing is
you
that,
know?
somebody can be very, very talented or very good at a particular position.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as a leader, your job is to put people in positions to succeed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And
Right.
a lot of that backbiting bullshit, I think,
Yes.
which I think continues to this day. I think we as a community as a fraternity are our own worst enemies. We're the
Mm.
ones making it hard on ourselves. Like this lionization of overwork. Like, dude, I put in 70 hours last week, or I put in 80 hours. Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
brag about. I mean, to me, that's complete fucking horseshit. Like I say, hashtag fuck the
Yeah.
grind, because all it is an excuse to like grind somebody else up. And
Yeah.
if we're not going to support one another, and I'm not
Right.
talking about and telling them that they're special. I'm just
Right.
saying that within an organization, within a like a team, like if
Hmm.
it was Phil Jackson putting together the 1985 Chicago Bulls, he knows that there's certain people that are going to do better in particular situations and
Right.
in particular circumstances. So
Right.
like it's really, really important to be able to match those skill sets with the positions that are available, and to provide everybody an opportunity to train up to the next position.
Right.
One of the biggest problems we have right now is that, we are constantly understaffed. Well,
Yes.
how many of us have actually created a succession plan and started slotting those names in and trying to figure out who's going to fill that slot? Because at some point the sous chef's going to go out on his own. So
Yep.
we're not training that person that's going to fill that position now, instead
Right.
of being like a surprise at the end, like, okay, well, I guess we're going to have to do this, and then
Right.
be completely totally unprepared for it. So it's like the difference between immature professional and a mature professional. A mature
Right.
professional look at the organization and going, okay, from a clear-eyed, neutral perspective, how do we build this machine to continue to produce at a high level for the foreseeable future, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I can't stress enough that a lot of the times the environment is so fast. Things are happening at such a quick level that we never have time to actually sit down and do that kind of work. However, if
Yeah.
we never make time to do that work, then we're always a victim of the fact that it's moving so fast.
Right. Exactly. And it ends up being this codependency,
Yeah, 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 for sure.
and maladaptive behaviors come into the mix.
Yep.
So, wow. Again, I know we're trying to work on mindfulness and really understanding the machine and this nurturing philosophy. Do you think at some point, sometimes we've kind of created where, we're missing some of that grit, or we're going to lose traction on that kind of heart? Do you ever see that kind
Well,
of
so you
concern?
so you mentioned two things. You mentioned grit and heart.
Yeah.
So I would say first and foremost, and speaking for myself, and today is a great example. Last week was a very frustrating week. I mean, there was a lots of stuff going on. And I took my time on Sunday to kind of map out my week and get all my time blocks together. And then
Mhm.
this morning rolled around and I felt completely frustrated by everything. And so what I knew that was necessary is for me to actually take a step back
Mm.
and take time for myself.
Mhm.
Because if I showed up in any of my different areas in which I participate, whether that's Chow and now as an ambassador, or Chef Life Radio, or Chef Life
Mhm.
Coaching, if I show up in any one of those spots and I'm not grounded, then it's going to be bad for me. You
Right.
know, I'm going to show up very, very poorly. So
Yeah.
if that means that I need to carve out a little bit more time for me to take some space, or that means I need to get back to my meditation in the morning, or my exercise, all those things help me to keep grounded all the way through my day. So I would think that first off, us taking that time to get grounded allows us to open up our heart. So there's our
Mhm.
heart right there. Our
Yeah.
grit comes from just the fact that, this is an industry we love, and that's part of the game. And okay,
Yeah.
we can do that. I sit and slam for 12, 14, 16 hours. Okay. You kind of set yourself up as a mindset for that. But the more that you're doing that as a consequence of, or as a result of, maybe not preparing properly. I mean, I've seen, grown adults, drinking Pedialyte on the line, just for their
Yeah.
hangover from the last night, or,
Right.
whatever that is, just to
No
get
family meal
over the hump.
or
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not leading yourself, then it's patently impossible to do that for
Yeah.
anybody.
Well,
So let's start with
that's
you
interesting.
first.
Okay. Well, I have to share, like, my leadership philosophy has always been grounded in my indigenous belief system,
Mhm.
that it's a great responsibility to be a leader and to guide and protect the people at all times.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, it's that servant leadership style.
Yep.
So on my side of it, it can get, I'm giving, and you still have to replenish the well, like you said.
Yeah. You got nothing left, man, after giving to everybody
And
else.
it's right. But I've also found the way that I nurture with, the sous chefs and chef de parties and everybody in the system, that it is a healthy system that does promote the growth you're talking about,
Certainly.
and there is a huge benefit to doing that, but it has its own stressors, like you Like
Sure. I mean,
so.
for me, it was the big shift came from when I realized that this could no longer be about me, that it had to be about the team. So it became
Mhm.
we instead of me.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, it's like, okay, so who am I supposed to be in that environment?
Mm,
Like, how do I show up such that they all get it, that they know that they're, protected, that they're safe, that there's an opportunity outside of, the next several hours for them
mhm.
to grow. And so when you talk about servant leadership, I think it's incredibly powerful to view yourself in that way, because the alternative is that, you are the king of the castle and the apex predator, and you have to
Mhm.
bend everybody to your will. There's
Right.
lots of documentaries out there about some very famous chefs who ran their kitchens that way because they were so consumed about their vision of a type of cuisine that they wanted to produce. They were so clear on that they couldn't let anything else, get in the way of that.
Yeah.
And everything else served that purpose. I would like
Okay.
to flip the script and say that, like, the better that we take care of our people, the
Mhm.
better that they're going to take care of the guest. And that circle of life continues from that standpoint. As a matter of
Right.
fact, the more we invest in our associates and our associate environment, the more it's going to pay off by, having really great places to go and eat. So, and again, it comes back to this down thing. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, bro, if you're not refilling your cup,
Right.
it's one of the I'm famous for saying, like, I've had people come up to me, chef, this has been my entire life. I really want to be a chef. It's all I've ever wanted to be. I'm like, great, go get a hobby.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
to have enough. So if we're creative, and if we're connected to creative muse, whether that's through our kind of domestication or conditioning or our belief system, we have this channel to the creative, and that comes out as, the food that we
Mhm.
make, the interactions that we have with our people. But
Right.
if you're completely vested in that, as from your work standpoint, like that's the only place you can get it, then what happens when you have to hang up your apron?
Right.
Some point, all of us have to. So to
Right.
get a hobby, to do something, to be able to feed that creative
Okay.
force is incredibly powerful, because now you get to shift from out of work. I know guys who made furniture. this one
Wow.
this one guy in particular, he started out by making shelves, and let me tell you, he wasn't very good to begin with.
Oh, jeez.
This banquet chef, but he makes some of the most stunning cutting boards I've ever seen. But he
Wow.
understood that he had needed something else other than work in order to feed his soul.
Okay. And
Like,
that's powerful.
and James, when you're talking about, like, you got into this business because of the thing that you felt like you needed. All of
Hmm.
us, to a certain extent, came to this business with a hole in our heart that needed to
Hmm.
get filled in some way.
Yeah.
For me, it was about relationship. For me, it was about family. So the very first time I was ever in a commercial kitchen and I saw the way everybody was together, I was like hooked. I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
shit. Yet I also understood that I couldn't. So for a while that worked, right?
Yeah.
Until it no
Yeah.
longer worked. And then I
Yeah.
realized that whole I got to feel some other way. And the only way that
Yep.
I could do that was through meditation and through spending some time alone and being out in nature, and, having some other things like a podcast or writing or other things to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like the muscle that you get to exercise about how I get to
Mm-hmm.
fill my cup. Because when I show up, I really want to be the best leader I can be. I want to be the best
Right.
culinarian I can be. I want to be the best, associate connection that I can be. And the only way I can do that is by consistently filling my cup, because I've been on the other side where, my cup is empty and made lots of mistakes. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
had at the very end of COVID, man, I was so burnt. I had no idea I was that burnt. And then I went on a meditation retreat and came back, and then had to take all my managers off the side and apologize to each and every one of them. Look,
Wow.
I know I dropped the ball. I wasn't there for you. Like having these really authentic, heart opening conversations about, like,
Wow.
listen, I can see where I messed up. Like, can you commit to another relation? Can you commit to a different relationship? Can you trust me now? How do we move forward together? Having those type of really open, vulnerable, transparent conversations, takes a lot of guts and a little bit of skill. But the point being is that someone shows up that way to you, the very first thing I think for me would be like, of course I forgive you. And how do we move forward together?
Wow.
Because we're so much, I think we're wired to, first off, be in community, and second, to, like, be forgiving of other people's
Hmm.
foibles, because we see the foibles within ourselves. Yet if we're all being, you know, strapped with that grind armor, where we never show our heart to anybody, just like how we're going to get through it and grit this thing through, it's a lot harder to have those conversations.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Well, and looking at, the state of the industry, and I know you mentioned some points there, maybe putting it all together, how how do you see us getting out of this? We got through the mass exodus and now we're dealing with the other side of it and coming through. What do you advise on how we get through the staffing crunch?
Well,
Techniques and
yeah, I mean, there's so much there.
yeah.
Um, so first off, it has to come down from the getting really clear about your core values and how your core values are being served with the community that you're in.
Hmm.
I'm not advocating that people look for other jobs, but I am advocating that now's a great time to like look at where you're at to see if it actually serves you. Because if it does, then everything else becomes as a consequence of that.
Hmm.
Great example was I had a chef or a sous chef who I promoted to a chef. And after about 6 months, he asked me to demote him again. I'm like, dude, what do you want to go back to sous chef for? Like, he's like, my kids are 5 and 7, man. I want to be home to tuck them in at night because they're only going to be this small for a little while. And so
Right.
I want to be there for them. And I was kind of like kicked back on my heels because I thought, holy shit, man, this guy's thinking about his family instead of his career. And, guiltily thought about my own career. Thought, I don't think I ever
Right.
had that conversation. But God damn it, he's right. Of course he
Yeah.
should be there, right? And
Right.
if he's in a job where that's being served, I think he shows up in a much more powerful way. So
Yeah.
the same way for all of us. I think it's a really important thing to make sure that the organization that we're with are aligned. And second of all, is to look at the organization and realize, that, listen, it's really, really hard to have any of these thoughts when all you're doing is just trying to get through the night, right?
Right.
Yet,
Exactly.
but yet there's going to be a time like exercising or meditating.
Hmm.
You think that there's no like, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time
Right.
for shit, chef. Well, okay. But I tell you what, if it was important enough to you, you would find the time.
Right.
So working on yourself first, like giving yourself that which need the needs that you have, serving that first. And then showing up in such a way that people understand that they are in an environment where they're safe, where they're protected, and where they have a clear career path. I think that's
Yeah.
really a great start, because word gets out. If things are changing in a particular environment, particular restaurant, and all of a sudden folks are feeling nurtured and cared for. And I hesitate to say nurture because I think nurture has this connotation again of saying, "Oh, you're special." No, that's not what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. I'm talking about valuing somebody for the whole human being that they are, and that's
Right.
that's a different thing. I think communication is something that we can all tap into right away. I think stand up shift meetings are incredibly important. Stand up meetings as just a way of continuing to have conversations with folks, checking in with seeing how everybody's doing emotionally. There's all kinds of different things
Hmm.
like Chow has a great restaurant wellness toolkit that you can download for free,
Hmm.
which is a great was a very powerful way of again kind of communicating to the staff that you're more than just a name or you're more than just a position. I think people will, you know, people want to be cared for. They don't want to show up and do a shitty job, but if they feel like they're kind of stuck in this situation where they're going to continue to show up as doing a shitty job, then it's really, really hard for them to get up in the morning and have any kind of gusto. So this whole idea of holding it all loosely and as a way of moving forward, creating an
Hmm.
environment where like, okay, it's not perfect, but we're a work in progress, and this is what we're committed to. And then to continue to show up to drop those kind of things, like the wellness toolkit, is really, really important. Chow does a Zoom call almost every night. They're based out of Denver. On Wednesdays, they have a men's only
Hmm.
call. I think there's another women's only call where hospitality professionals can show up on the Zoom call and talk or not talk about their day or their week. Sobriety is not a prerequisite to show up in these meetings, but as a way to kind of feel connected to others that might not necessarily be in your environment. Also is a great way of like tapping into the bigger culture of service. Like
Hmm.
sometimes it's easy to forget that we're in the hospitality business.
Yeah.
And so that means like by its very nature, we are in service to someone else, which means sometimes we have to subserve our particular needs in that particular moment. But that doesn't mean that it's a lifelong thing, and we continue to subserve our needs for any extended time that's actually healthy. So I
Yeah.
think all those things are really, really important in growing a community. So if we start looking at our staff as not a family, but as a team or as a community, and how do you build community? I think is a
Hmm.
perfect way of like tapping into those resources that are already out there, like I Got Your Back, or Not 9 to 5, or Chow. There's all kinds of organizations and processes available now that didn't exist pre-COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
they did, but no, it wasn't on anybody's radar, right?
Right.
And then once
Right.
COVID hit, and all of a sudden everybody's wellness, and they're like, oh my shit. And I just want to say one other thing before we go is that a lot of things post COVID, a lot of companies started putting in these wellness initiatives. And
Hmm.
what they discovered is that in review, what they discovered is that most of these initiatives fell flat because they didn't necessarily address the underlying cause. So
Okay.
they could say, okay, so there's a particular program that's available now where you contract with a local counselor, and it's an anonymous service where anybody in the staff can call and get a meeting with a healthcare professional or a mental health professional and sit down and talk to them.
Hmm.
And the only thing HR knows is that there's just an X name for a bill. It's completely anonymous.
Wow.
Yet if really not dealing with the underlying issues. So a couple of years ago, Oregon instituted Prop, I think 101, which or 110, which is the legalization of all drugs.
Hmm.
And they at the same time it set up this infrastructure for if someone was caught on the street with drugs, you got fined $100 and you got referred to a healthcare clinic or some type of rehab or whatever.
Wow.
The problem is that the healthcare or the mental health infrastructure never got built up. So
Okay.
so several years later, they're seeing these guys shooting on the street and they can't figure out what the hell's going on. Well, they could pay their $100, but they can't get it. They can't get a bed in anywhere.
Wow.
So one thing doesn't necessarily equate to the other. So if you're going to create an environment where there's an opportunity, you need to make sure that that opportunity actually exists. And the things on the ground floor, like elbow to elbow, like if you're talking about improving your culture, well,
Hmm.
then improve your culture,
Yeah.
but don't put a Band-Aid on it and say, okay, well, you can go talk to somebody about the culture
Okay.
without it,
Right.
without actually changing the culture. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, from the ground up.
Yeah.
So can I just ask real quick, when you
Sure.
when you go in and you're doing your coaching and working through that process, can you give an example how you engage and work with like a food and beverage group as you start
Sure.
your
Yeah,
analysis?
I have a client right now out in California. It's a independent restaurant, 110 seats. They're looking to build this particular concept up to 10, 12 locations. And the first thing I kind of came in as a consultant slash coach, and now my job has shifted to primarily leadership coaching. So I speak with every single one of the managers and assistant managers. So I speak to them every other week in a structured coaching format. And I also speak to all the hourly staff once a month.
Okay.
So it's an environment by which I support the mission moving forward. And yet I also give them an opportunity to be kind of transparent and vulnerable in a space where they know that I am going to hold all that confidential. And
Okay.
basically what I do is I support the mission by giving my partner a call log
Hmm.
and some notes about what happened without going into anything that would be, considered confidential. So it's
Okay.
kind of one of these opportunities to like there's a conversation that's happening in the moment, and then there's a
Hmm.
leadership trajectory that happens over a long period of time, maybe 3 to 6 months.
Okay. That's really cool. Do you do
Oh,
individual coaching, one-on-ones
yep, I
with
do one-on-ones, and I also do group coaching. I'm
okay.
looking to work with some organizations who may be, you know, uh, anywhere from 3 to 7, 3 to 10 locations. Maybe it's a boutique hotel group or a
Okay.
restaurant group, and be able to coach and mentor their culinary leadership.
Okay. Well, in how can they reach out to you? I mean, obviously your
Sure.
website and
Yeah, absolutely. They can email me at adam@chefliferadio.com. You can check out the website at chefliferadio.com or cheflifecoaching.com. Chef
okay.
Life Radio is on every single podcast aggregator out there. And you can text me at 828-407-3359
A
to
lot of
access.
availability.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that opportunity then.
I
All
I
right.
want to be open and available. And there's certain office hours and stuff, and maybe I
Yeah.
don't answer my phone at 2 o'clock in the
Yeah,
morning.
2
But
a.m.
if you
Yeah.
if you've got a question, I want to be able to answer it for sure.
Yeah. So cool. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Chef. I
Thank you,
appreciate your
brother.
time and
Thanks.
all
Appreciate it.
right. Yeah, all right, everyone. That is a wrap. You can check us out if you like that. Subscribe. Also, the Instagram, Chef Massey. Let's keep it simple. chefmassey.com. Have a good one. Bye for now.